Now, when we last met in part 2, we left as television broadcasting was beginning to take root in Nigeria. Its capture of the Nigerian entertainment landscape led to what we now refer to as the video film era, which stretched from the 80s to the mid-2000s. Television broadcasting was not really new to Nigeria by the 80s. It had taken root earlier on in the 50s, specifically in October 1959, when the first television broadcasting network under the name Western Nigerian Television, or WNTV for short, was based in Ibadan, Oyo State.
The opening of the Western Nigeria television service was a great occasion, not only because it was the first of its kind in the whole of Africa, but also because of the prodigious efforts which had gone into making it possible in so short a space of time.
WNTV was quite successful and led to the establishment of other television stations in the early 60s. Stations such as the Eastern Nigerian Television, ENTV, was launched in Enugu by 1962, and the following year, the Nigerian Television Service was launched in Lagos. The strength of television broadcasting only grew stronger by the establishment of the Nigerian Television Authority in 1977. This new pillar in the broadcasting industry would become the sole television broadcaster in Nigeria. And now, this brings us to the late 80s. At this point, celluloid was now losing its grip as the most used distribution and showcasing format. The high expenses associated with the format were beginning to show, and the changing technological and economical landscape left producers and distributors vying for a more affordable alternative. Economic factors that had initially led to an increase in cinema houses and cinema productions also had an effect on the industry. This meant that there was more disposable income and households could now afford television sets. At the same time, this made people shift from visiting cinema houses and opting for a more at-home option as more local stations were established in this period. These stations would transmit foreign films at night and during weekends, which made the social aspect of film watching come back closer to home. Not only that, but television was easily available. There was no need to go out and buy a ticket and then worry about the logistics of getting there and back home. Granted, some of the films being broadcasted were quite old, but the home video era had just started. The arrival of the video home system, VHS for short, leveled the playing field with cinema houses. The latest international films became more readily available and for a cheaper price compared to that of a cinema ticket. Now, all this combined with the economic hardships brought by the oil bust of the 80s meant running a fully profitable cinema house was mostly difficult. As a result, a lot of cinema houses folded in the late 80s and early 90s. There are more reasons as to why cinema houses failed, which are not directly related to the introduction of television and VHS too. For example, the introduction of the structural adjustment program in Nigeria in 1986 basically wiped out the middle class in Nigeria. And with the middle class making up the majority of casual cinema goers of the time, the industry also ran out of a wide pool of audiences. At this point, VHS tapes trading was beginning to take bloom. The initial sparks emerged when people started recording shows on VHS tapes and informally trading them with their friends and family whenever they wanted to watch something different. This method of trading was adopted and built on by producers and distributors at the now famous Alaba market, sparking the start of a widespread revolution. Alaba market would later grow to be the hub of video film distribution in Nigeria. Of note is the 1983 film by Jimmy Odumosu titled Evil Encounter. This horror film that was released direct to television was copied over on VHS tapes and flooded the streets of Lagos the next morning. The film itself became an instant hit and was in high demand at Alaba Market. By 1988, the first film produced on video in Nigeria was Soso Meji, produced by Ade Ajiboye. Though it was screened in some cinemas at the time, the film itself heavily depended on the selling of its VHS copies. Another key milestone in the video film era was the release of the film Living in Bondage. This film exploded onto the scene in 1992, having been a budget film shot on a video camera using a number of video cassettes, which the producer had bought to shoot the film. The trend of shooting straight-to-video tapes engulfed the film industry throughout the 90s and into the early 20s. And when the National Film Festival was first held in 1993 in Nigeria, about 81 films were recognized and produced locally. the most being in the Yoruba language, followed by English, Hausa, and Igbo. These numbers kept on increasing through 1995, with 177 official films being recorded by the Nigerian Census Board. And in 1996, the number increased to 233. This increase was a direct result of just how cheap it had become to create straight-to-video films. On the quality side, it was evident that these films were extremely low budget. For example, films would be shot on a cheap video camera and edited with VCRs, which carried limited editing functionality. But this did not turn away the market. With the rise of piracy as well, it barely ever paid off to invest large sums of money into high-quality productions. These were also not an appealing option, as most of the time, bigger budgets required financing from foreign agents who would take away the autonomy and creative freedom of the filmmakers. The turn of the new millennium did not stop the fire. In 2000 alone, the number of films produced totaled over 712, doubling that of the previous year. And in 2001, it went up to 761 films. And by 2003, there were 1,018 films produced in Nigeria alone. These numbers are still estimates, as it is believed production houses were churning out 3 to 5 films a day in this period. In line with the increase in films produced, on the continental side, Nigerian films became a staple in African homes. Nigerian culture became a mainstay in most countries, with its influence reaching the popular culture level of African society. Slang terms and ways of dressings and the names of actors from Nigeria were now household characteristics. Not only in Africa, but also in Asia and Europe, often referred to as the diaspora, these films grew a near cult following. The distribution system of these films to all of these other countries was often like that of Nigeria. Cassette tapes would be made using VCRs and then either rented or sold to the masses on streets. Imagine Blockbuster, but less formal. In other countries such as Ghana, there was some backlash as they viewed Nigerian films as a form of cultural dilution. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, they even tried to ban Nigerian films, and in neighboring Niger, there were parties against the proliferation of Nigerian films. However, even with Nigerian films gathering global fame, the local industry still did not receive the amount of commercial success it would have hoped for. The industry was worth about $250 million at its peak, and which was a fraction compared to both Bollywood and Hollywood. And for an industry churning out 4 to 5 films per production house per day, oversaturation of the market further diluted the profits for filmmakers. Piracy was reigning supreme, and the lack of quality content across the board diluted the profits even further. On the domestic front, the film industry in Nigeria became one of the nation's biggest employers and was contributing about 5% of the GDP at its peak in 2008. In the same year, 200 films a month were being produced to service a market of 15 million locally and over 5 million globally. At this point, the industry was now being described as a visionless industry. Individuals such as Lancelot Odua would mention that a film could be shot in 4 days, and this was a testament to just how fast and often restless the industry was. Even during the filming process itself, there were issues. Actors would often book multiple films in one go and would choose to show up at their free will. Some even mentioned that they would work on films where the script itself was still being written during production. But by 2008, the cracks were beginning to show. The industry had peaked in the previous 3 years and was now in decline. Piracy was at an all-time high, with over 90% of the DVDs circulating in the market being considered to be illegal copies. Some producers even blamed distributors themselves, stating that they would lock up the original copies given to them and sell illegal copies that they would have made. At the same time, major television networks in Nigeria began to show independently produced films without any permission or attribution to the original owners. This and the ongoing increase in cost of production within Nigeria made investors focus on other business ventures instead of the industry. Now, despite its many flaws, the video film era is still recognized as the most influential period in Nigerian cinema history. It laid the groundwork for Nollywood's global reach, making Nigerian films a cultural staple across Africa and the diaspora. The era popularized Nigerian culture, influencing language, fashion, and societal norms in many communities. Even as production quality was often criticized, the raw, rapid-fire nature of these films resonated with audiences and played a crucial role in democratizing film production in Nigeria. By the late 2000s, as the cracks began to show, Ranging from rampant piracy to declining profitability, the industry reached a turning point. The shortcomings of the video film era eventually paved the way for the emergence of the new Nigerian cinema, where higher budgets, longer production times, and improved technical standards began to reshape Nollywood's landscape. The video film era introduced innovative distribution channels via VHS and left the groundwork for what would become one of the biggest film industries in the world. And in episode 4, we'll explore how the new Nigerian cinema era itself grew out of the video film era. Catch you on the next one.